Viewers, we have been faced with a very, very harsh backlash over the last few weeks, months, to certain events which bear no repetition. A disturbing uptick in this violent backlash has made a large number of Indians extremely uneasy and wondering what it will take to narrow the gap between what now appears to be irreconcilable differences between various traditions in our country. In the context of these disturbances, we are joined by S. Gurumurthy, who is a leading editor of the Tughlak. He is a widely respected commentator who India must hear. Mr. Gurumurthy, what's behind the disturbing explosion of Sartan Se Juda slogans across India, the reaction to perceived provocations, real or imagined?
You see, actually in India, our constitution, our public discourse, and our intellectual and academic understanding tend to see both the Abrahamic religions and the Indic religions as having the same worldview and almost the same kind of faith, which is not true. The Indic faiths, except Hinduism, others are also proselytizing religions. Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism are proselytizing religions. They want to add to their numbers. And a huge success was also achieved by Buddhism and Jainism. But it was not to regard those who do not follow their faiths as somebody who must be eliminated or who must be treated as second-class citizens or who must be given the status of a slave. This is not the Indic religious approach. Of course, Hinduism stands out as a religion which does not distinguish between those who follow this and those who do not. But so far as the Abrahamic religions are concerned, their worldview is clear. They have a global agenda to turn the world in their own image. That means the world has to be completely Christian. The world has to be completely Islamic. This is the approach. In this, they have a clear them versus us division of the world. It is their God versus others' God. It is their religion versus the others' religion. And in this, the others have to be given a certain treatment. They have to be treated as slaves or second-class citizens, or they may even have to be eliminated. And all these three kinds of treatment are theologically permissible. Because of that, any comment on their religion, any comment on their founders, any comment on their principles is something which makes them react violently, which will not happen in the case of the Indic religions. You say something about Buddha, people will feel hurt, but nobody will take a bomb in their hand or a sword in their hand and cut somebody's throat. So this difference in the basic paradigmic idea of what is Indic religion and Abrahamic religion has not been understood. And that is why when we say that when we are criticized, we are not like that. When you are criticized, you are reacting violently. It must be understood that basically Abrahamic religions have a violent theological drive.
Okay. Bilkis Bano to the provocation by T. Raja Singh. Many are saying these incidents confirm the BJP's antipathy towards Muslims. And therefore, we are seeing these reactions. This has got nothing to do with what our texts tell us, what our teachings tell us. This is now, we have hit the wall, and this is the response to that. It's a deep alienation. How do you respond to this observation that is being made increasingly?
You see, I am not here to defend the BJP. It is for the BJP to defend whether in Bilkis Banu's case what they have done is correct or not. I have taken a position, it is not correct. It is not correct for the simple reason that in Hinduism, a woman being treated dishonorably can never be accepted. So my position is different. But to say that somebody takes a position on BJP and that is BJP's position, and then expand it to the entire ideological framework of BJP, and then make it some kind of a Hindu attitude to the Muslims, I think it is politics.
It is politics. It is completely political, you're saying. Opportunism, call it that, call it at a degree of sophistry, fair enough. Let me take it a little further, because I've had some, on this channel, interviews with Mr. Owaisi, for example, who criticize the Sartan Se Juda slogans, but eventually don't act against those people who are going out there and chanting Sartan Se Juda. But they also say that the violent reaction by Muslims is a natural reaction to what we are seeing now is a hostile environment in general for Muslims in our country. And this sort of also connects with what is being said about India having taken a more divisive turn. And you have probably read those articles in the Western media, etc., etc. And of course, a large number of self-proclaimed liberal in India who say this, that there is now a greater disregard in India for Muslim sentiments, for Muslims in general. What do you say to this group of people? Some of them are quite respectable as far as intellectuals are concerned.
You see, it is not that that this is something which has suddenly appeared today. When Mahatma Gandhi was leading the country, when Jawaharlal Nehru was leading the country, when Sardar Patel was in the picture, when Abdul Kalam Azad was there, what happened? At that time, there was no question of national or Hindu program against the Muslims. Why did the Muslims behave the way they did from 1920s, 1937, 1940, 1947? So it is not that the Muslims react, they also proactively work to further the Islamic agenda. That is the natural drive of the Muslims. They don't want any resistance. They don't want any objection. They don't want somebody to say what you are doing is wrong. If you say what you are doing is wrong, that's a provocation. That means they cannot face criticism. The most important thing is Islamic theology brooks no criticism from within or out. That is why even those Muslims who slightly deviate from Islam are being put to death. You know what is happening between Shias and Sunnis. You know what is happening to Ahmadiyas. So don't think that Islam only reacts. It is very proactive, and that is what resulted in the creation of Pakistan. Otherwise, Mahatma Gandhi was an enemy of Muslims. Jawaharlal Nehru was an enemy of Muslims. It's completely wrong to contextualize the what is known as the Muslim anger, part of which is, according to me, the media creation, to the ruling disposition today. Is completely wrong. The fact is, the real fact is that Hindus suffer from the paradox of tolerance. You see, it is a great tolerant tradition that this country has built over thousands of years. And this tolerance is facing intolerance for the last 1,000 years. When the tolerance keeps on tolerating the intolerant, a situation comes when the tolerant itself is a danger. This is what Karl Popper said in 1945 as the paradox of tolerance. The Hindus are facing the paradox of tolerance for the last several centuries. And because of democracy, because of the explosion of media, this tolerant aspect has been cast aside. And the intolerant aspect has been projected as only a reaction. Completely wrong. Where are these intellectuals who will speak about what happened in 1920s, 30s, 40s? There was no Modi then. There was no BJP then. My view is this discourse has to be more deep-rooted. It cannot be based on newspaper headlines. It cannot be based on Twitter. It cannot be based on one or two incidents. It has to take a broad historical view from when Ghazni Muhammad invaded India, when temples were demolished. I think we have got to take a broad historical view as to what is the behavior of who. Then we will know who is proactively intolerant and who is resisting that intolerance. Resisting intolerance is called intolerance today. This is precisely what Karl Popper said as the paradox of tolerance.
So, Mr. Gurumurthy, I presume we are drawing a distinction. When you say Muslims, you are drawing a distinction between the ordinary Muslim citizen of this country and those that are politically realized Muslims who are furthering perhaps political Islam.
100%.
Yes. So we are not conflating the entire community here. We are
100%.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Not at all. I am only talking about the theological impact. And the theological impact and the theological exposition is driven by a very small percentage of people who have in their hold a very substantial number of people. And the others cannot but go by what they say. This is the hierarchy of opinion making in Islam.
Let me ask you this because it's an important point in our conversation now. Many people say that after independence, it has taken about 40 years for a Hindu political conscience to awaken. And that has happened on the back of, for example, the Ram Janambhoomi movement. It happened on the back of the growth of or the wider acceptance of Hindutva. And what we are seeing really is a reaction to Hindutva. We are not seeing a reaction to the ordinary Hindu. Just like the ordinary Muslim is peace-loving, so is the ordinary Hindu, but there is a component which is a politically realized Hindu who advocates Hindutva. And you hear that from Rahul Gandhi, you hear that from the opposition all across, north, south, east, west. You hear that from, of course, intellectuals, leftists. They say the problem is Hindutva, and that is what is creating and engendering this backlash.
You see, Hindutva is an evolution which dates back to the days of Swami Vivekananda, Aurobindo, and it had a wider acceptance even before the freedom movement. In 1909, when Mahatma Gandhi wrote the Hind Swaraj, he said it is the Hindu model of establishing centers of worship, the worship of the Ganga, that keeps the country united. And when he was asked, what about Muslims? He said they have to be assimilated into it. This is 1909. In 1935, Jawaharlal Nehru wrote in the Glimpses of World History that Swami Vivekananda's Hindu nationalism was not against anyone. And Hindu nationalism and Indian nationalism cannot be separated easily because India is the only country of Hindus. This was the position. Even the Rajani Palme Dutt, a leftist who established the Communist Party in England, he wrote that even if the British had not established English education here, as they claim that it is only the English education which taught us the spirit of freedom. He said our Veda Padashalas in distant corners of India would have given us the spirit of freedom. This was the position till 1940. Everything changed when Jinnah passed the Pakistan resolution. So the Hindu character of the country is not something new. This was recognized by the Supreme Court in the Hindutva judgment. After all, Hindutva was a political movement, a cultural political movement which won elections on the Hindutva platform in 1991. And this was contested by all the political parties who lost. And they went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, we see no difference between Hinduism and Hindutva. It is the ethos of India, a way of life, the culture of India. And this was not the judgment of 1995. This was sourced in a constitution bench judgment of 1976 when Congress was ruling. So this is not Hindutva judgment in isolation which evolved as a response to the political movement in 1990s. So the Hindutva judgment is an affirmation of the evolution of India as a nation from as the 19th and 20th century progressed. And this judgment the Supreme Court refused to review. A 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court said in 2016 that we don't want to review this judgment. It means those who talk against Hindutva are really talking against the Supreme Court. They are talking against what Mahatma Gandhi wrote in 1909, what Jawaharlal Nehru wrote in 1935. So people do not know the basic facts. So my understanding is that we suffer from a Twitter mentality of discourse. We need a Tarka Shastra. We have to sit and discuss how this nation evolved, how the freedom movement evolved, how it was distorted by the Muslim separatist movement. And that is what has caused a havoc in this country.
My final question, would you accept, Mr. Gurumurthy, that community relations today in India are at a historic low? And if so, how do we address this?
You see, I have a feeling that there is a perception and there is a reality. The perception that there is an inter-community relationship at a very low level is not matched by reality is my view. People have to keep up this perception, have to talk about it. This is politics. They have to create vote banks, sustain the vote banks, not allow any vote bank to dilute, whether it is caste, whether it is community. So I don't go by this perceptions created by interested discourse. I think India has much more capacity to be flat. For example, as religion is seen as a divider, language is a unifier. A Malayali Muslim feels more comfortable with a Malayali Hindu than with a Hindi-speaking Muslim in UP. So there is an interlocking of India at various levels. Language, then caste. There is huge caste factor working among Muslims. And there are Kurmi Muslims, there are Jat Muslims, there are Sayeds, and there are Gujars, and there are Labais, and there are Urdu Muslims. You know, it is not that Islam is a monotheistic religion, but Muslims are not a monotheistic community.
So you don't believe that there is this fracture, rupture, call it what you want to. Very interesting, very interesting. It's been, once again, very interesting speaking to you. Yes. No, you want to say something? Final words? Yes.
My final words are, the media should focus on building an alternative narrative to the political divisiveness which has come. This divisiveness need not be attributed to one party or the other. Who is proactively doing it, who is reactively doing it, both have to be distinguished. My view is, if you have to question Islam, you have to ask them only 3 questions. Tell me who is a kafir. Tell me, am I a kafir? Tell me what is jihad. Will you do jihad with me? Let the Muslim establishment answer this question. Why do you go and talk about Prophet? It is unnecessary. You talk about what is relevant today. In Prophet's time, what happened, we are not concerned with it. You put proper questions which is relevant to Hindu-Muslim relationship in the context of Islamic theology. I think the Hindu discourse have to become more positive and more rational, more intellectual than it is today.
Well, you couldn't have got a better exposition of the subject that we have discussed. Thank you very much, Mr. Gurumurthy. Thank you very much for sparing time.